good. So also on my side, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for the interesting study and for the interesting speakers also. So we don't have too much time, so I wanted to basically discuss in my short intervention maybe 4 issues, which is the digital decade, 5G, the RRF, the Recovery Fund, and the Ceph Digital Fund. So if we go through these issues, so it has already been noted by many speakers also at other occasions, but during the pandemic, we have, of course, only been able to more or less continue our lives economically, socially, and culturally by going digital. So we consult online with doctors, teachers, and students, and we meet our family and friends in video calls. So we've turned to living our lives largely through our screens, and that only underlines that connectivity as a precondition for digital has become crucial in our life. And in this sense, the COVID crisis has also revealed new digital divides and exposed the dependency of Europe to the various technologies. So this is why on the 9th of March, the Commission has presented a digital decade communication, or also the digital compass, which sets out a comprehensive vision for Europe's digital sovereignty and leadership for 2030. So it is a vision of innovative businesses, empowered citizens, and one where the EU is a respected and international partner, mastering strategic digital technologies, resulting in an open and prosperous society. It is important to say that this is not a change, but it is a new impetus that accelerates and widens what has already been launched, so that all European businesses and citizens can benefit from digital opportunities. So our strategic framework remains valid. So the communication evolves around 4 what we call cardinal points. It is a digital skilled population and highly skilled digital professionals, a secure, performant and sustainable digital infrastructure, and then the digital transformation of businesses and the digitalization of public services. Now, I was pleased to hear that Mr. Štefanec already mentioned a number of the targets that we have identified for these various areas. So we also present a vision for a sustainable, innovative and human-centered digital society. And that proposes to establish a governance structure, which purpose is in particular to achieve these targets, but achieve them by cooperation between the member states and the Commission. So in this context, we in particular have proposed this digital compass, which basically identifies the trajectory and introduces a monitoring process on the basis of our DAISY index, which allows establishing through a traffic light system whether the member states are on track or not, after which it would be possible to jointly identify ways of remedying situations that are not going so well. In this context, we also propose digital principles that should anchor the European approach to digitalization, basically in order to foster a shared understanding of the digital future that we, our citizens, want in Europe. And such digital principles would be endorsed in a declaration and guide policymakers when they take decisions on digitalization. Now, in this context, it's very important that the EU should master quickly evolving digital technologies. And it should also have the capacity to develop and deploy such infrastructures on its own. So as you know, and it was already mentioned, important resources have been made available. And it's very important that we all work together in a coordinated approach towards these key areas. So in this context, we also propose in the communication the coordination of national investments through what we call multi-country projects. And we propose to ensure alignment with the impetus driven by the digital decade communication. So such multi-country projects aim to deploy large digital infrastructures and capabilities and production capacities For instance, indeed, the Alliance on Microprocessors is a good example of how member states can work together with the Commission, also operating on the basis of an easy-to-mobilize infrastructure. So we hope to propose a policy program before the end of September, and we also hope to have a targeted consultation on the communication in the coming months. So you're invited to participate. This is the digital decade. So then moving to 5G. So the rollout of 5G in all populated areas is a key element of the digital decade. It's the target, it's one of the two targets formulated for infrastructure. So as highlighted in the report that was presented today, the full 5G deployment will enable a whole range of new devices provided through IoT. It will offer opportunities on data, cloud, robotics, autonomous vehicles, and we have heard some dazzling figures on what is necessary to get there and also what it is likely to deliver for Europe. In this context, it's also relevant to mention Ethno, who also published in a recent report that Europe can create 2.4 million new jobs through digital transformation. Now, the Commission is indeed working to support infrastructure investments, especially in rural and remote areas. So there we feel that connectivity is at the center of the digital transformation. So the deployment of fiber and 5G infrastructures will provide powerful network capacity to implement smart applications on the basis of IoT, cloud, and AI technology. And that in its turn would be expected to enable innovation of verticals in sectors as agro-food, so agriculture, manufacturing, logistics, health, public service, and smart village applications. So we expect the deployment of 5G can, for instance, allow thousands of local communities to develop sustainable and resilient economic models. Then, on the basis of the RRF, it is very important to note that the discussions with the member states, as many as you know, are in their crucial state, also in view of the fact that the deadline to submit the recovery and resilience plans is expiring by the end of the month. So basically, we are with many member states in a finalization stage of discussing their plans. And of course, these discussions are confidential, but I'm happy to see that almost 2/3 of all member states are already planning to invest into connectivity deployment, with half of them explicitly aiming to support 5G rollouts. In this context, it is important, I mean, it was very good to listen to the presentation of the study and indeed also to the role of public financing, including, I would say, through the RRF. But it's important to also take into account that on the basis of the European competition rules, of course, the state aid rules need to be taken into account. So we are encouraging member states to engage in a proper analysis of these state aid principles. And in this context, I think it was important to indeed, as good as this study is, maybe to highlight a specific point in the sense that member states may have to notify the plans under the state aid rules of the Commission. And in that context, it's very relevant whether there is a true market failure. So I think the figures that have been presented in the study are very useful and helpful to come to an analysis. But what I think going forward will become increasingly more important is to identify, I mean, what is the quality of services that users need and whether there is a network already available that offers this quality of service. So one of the issues there is that in principle, if there is a 4G network, one would say a 5G network is not something that needs to be financed through public sources. However, there may be reason to have a more refined analysis and to see what is the exact quality of service offered by the 4G network and what would be necessary to be offered going forward, looking at users' needs. So an important point I would say to note. One point still in the context of the Recovery and Resilience Fund is indeed also, as Mr. Schnorr was signaling, the importance of the reforms in the context of the Resilience Fund. And there, in particular, we see a role for the connectivity toolbox. So the member states, on encouragement of the Commission, have been working on a toolbox to identify measures how to accelerate the rollout of 5G and also fiber networks. And this has resulted in a toolbox that was adopted and published last month. And presently, the member states are in the process of identifying their own roadmaps, which will identify how they will accelerate this rollout. And one of the issues, for instance, if you talk about 5G, is the relevance of a timely and efficient issuing of spectrum. So in this context, it's interesting to see the timeliness of the submission of the plans in relation to the submission of the roadmaps. So in the roadmaps, we would feel that a number of reforms will be introduced that will help the realization of the plans. Now then, two more comments. I would say it's very important in this context also to mention the Ceph Digital Fund, which is another fund that allows the financing of infrastructure. So under the RRF, the plans need to be submitted this month. On Ceph Digital, we are proposing to launch calls in the near future. And one of the issues, for instance, under Ceph Digital that can be financed is the 5G Communities program. And this would invite 5G deployment for services of general economic interest. And what we see is that, for instance, for these 5G projects of general economic interest, communities could actually be in the driving seat and have a front role in the development of 5G concepts, while 5G is being rolled out in the rest of Europe. So we are preparing the work program for Ceph Digital, and we hope to share it as soon as possible when it's ready. And then finally, an issue to highlight also is we were talking about public financing, but of course the cooperation with private investors is also very important. So when we speak about the Recovery and Resilience Fund and the Ceph Digital funds, both funds have possibilities of combining their use in the context of individual projects, and also of combining their use with private investors. And we would very much encourage that market parties are working both with public and private investments. So I think this is enough for now, and I would happily refer to you for the next speakers. Thank you.